Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, I want to talk to you guys about the Amazon Prime show, The Boys. I recently sat down and watched all 8 episodes in about a day or two, and I absolutely loved this show. So, it's about superheroes, if you've not heard of it. And this episode is going to have copious spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, you may want to go and watch it first and then come back. This is our only spoiler warning for this episode. The Boys is a TV series based off of some comic books by Garth Ennis. And Garth Ennis and Eric Kripke, who you may know from Supernatural, have created this program for television together. So they are our producers, and Eric also directs one of the episodes. So this show is about the concept of superheroes and how they're normally portrayed as being super popular like celebrities. For the most part, everyone loves Superman, right? At least in the city of Metropolis. And then they can also be really influential, like politicians. And sometimes people can view them as being almost godlike, much like Superman. Again, because people revere or fear what they don't understand. And with Superman and the others, they really love them because they are using their powers for good, right? But The Boys kind of takes a different look at this, which is kind of similar in nature to Watchmen. So they wanted to see what happens when the heroes just abuse their powers, just like regular folks, like celebrities and politicians do nowadays. So with great power comes great responsibility, but just because there is a responsibility does not mean that people actually wield that responsibility responsibly. So it's showing that there's a great capacity for things to go sideways, and that you don't have to be a super villain to be villainous or do villainous things. You don't have to be a super villain to be corrupted. And again, it's like Lincoln says that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And you see this unfold throughout the entire series of The Boys. And it's really showing you that everyone is crappy. And I love those type of shows where a lot of the characters are just absolutely terrible, and seemingly almost none of them are really redeemable in any way. And we see that happening a lot in The Boys. So whether it is the superheroes who are irresponsibly wielding their powers and abusing their power and influence, or whether it is the group referred to as the Boys, the human group that is trying to fight them and take on the ones who are abusing their power, everyone is flawed in some way. It's really interesting to see all of the different ways, whether it be Billy Butcher's absolute commitment to absolutism, really, and saying that all of the superheroes are evil, no matter what, that they all are awful and they all abuse their power, and he thinks that they should all be killed. And that includes even ones that we know as viewers to be good, like Starlight. Billy is flawed in that he can't see past his own rage and hatred for one specific superhero and applying that to all others to understand that the only real absolute is that there are no absolutes. Even Starlight is flawed in some ways, so she is actually deep down, and even on the surface, a good person. But she also is a little naive in many ways, especially as we start out. She is superpowered, but she has not stepped into her own power as a person. She can definitely fight crime and wield her powers, her supernatural powers, for good. But as a person, she doesn't really understand necessarily what's going on and what she's gotten herself into at first. So we have a hero's journey for Starlight, and we also have a hero's journey for Huey, one of our other main characters. So this is more of an ensemble cast, and it's huge how many characters are in this ensemble cast, although more attention gets dedicated to some rather than others. But overall, it is pretty evenly spread. We start out in episode 1 with the main premise that these superheroes are almost like reality TV personalities. So we see that Starlight, whose name is Annie, is going through and training for like this reality show almost. She's training for this competition for the chance to become one of the 7. And the 7 are 7 superheroes who are employed by a company called Vought. And Vought is responsible for kind of overseeing superheroes in the United States. And they have about 200 superheroes overall distributed everywhere, whether that's Boston or Baltimore or Sandusky, Ohio. They are all over the U.S. distributed to help fight crime. We still have police officers in this case, but the supers are also there to do that. However, Vought is also acting almost like their agents. In a way, they're their PR and their marketing, but also, interestingly, almost their bosses in a way. It's very tenuous of a hold that Vought truly has on these superheroes as they get further along. And you can see how the relationship between Homelander and Vought is very different, as he was the first of the 7, from how Annie's relationship is as Starlight when she is the most recent to join the 7. So Annie is lifting cars and punching brick walls, and you see her mom is supporting her, and she's like, punch harder, you need to punch all the way through the wall. And Annie is working hard on this, and she is displaying her powers on camera like it's an audition. It 100% looks like an audition tape in which she is saying her name and what she goes by, Starlight in this case, and then displaying her powers for them. And then she comes home and she tells her mom that she thinks she messed it up and that she didn't get the part, or she didn't get the position that she was going out for. And she's like, this is a national competition. Someone else is going to get it. And she also had to sit there and talk about how she used to do pageants to prepare for this as a kid and how she didn't enjoy doing those. So it shows like a human aspect of Annie as well as the superhuman aspect. And she just seems like a really sweet kid who is trying to pursue a dream. And they treat it almost like it's an American Idol home competition, except there is no competition on television. They just select them from the audition tapes and then go, okay, yeah, that's it. You are one of the 7. So it's very interesting and very American in the way that they display it. It's a lot of themes of American excess in a way. And I really enjoy how thoroughly they portray this as being political and also being influencers and being godlike in many ways. I think The Boys does a really good job in getting all of this across, and it's part satire of hero worship and part an indictment of the celebrity of anyone who is popular in the US right now, not even just superheroes. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about what happens when Starlight joins the Seven. Stay tuned. You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco, ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Before the break, we were introducing the topic of The Boys, including the creator Garth Ennis and the co-creator of the television version, Eric Kripke. We also talked a little bit about how The Boys is part satire and part explicit indictment of the celebration of celebrities and how they can be simultaneously acting as politicians and influencers and being revered as being godlike. And we're going to talk about that a little more in this episode. Right now, I want to pick up with what happens when Annie, Starlight, joins the Seven. So in the show, we see that Lamplighter, one of the Seven, is retiring, and so we are getting a replacement that they decide to do via a national competition. It's very American Dream in a way, and just overall very American. We love our reality TV, you guys, and we love our competitions. So this is very much an American show. Now, that's not to say that it may not resonate with folks in other countries, but you can definitely sense a theme of almost a satire of the American experience within the show. So Starlight is who ends up replacing Lamplighter, and she doesn't think she's going to get it, and then all of her dreams seemingly come true. But it's a little bit naive on her part, and it's not her fault because she, after all, was raised like everyone else in America to revere these people and to think that they are heroes, in fact, but really they're just superpowered individuals. The name superhero is actually not entirely true in the literal sense. Now, they are heroes in that they do sometimes save people, but we find out later that most of this is staged PR stunts. So we see Starlight come in and she's getting a tour of the facility and meeting one of the other characters who's kind of like Aquaman, and they refer to him as the Deep. So the Deep has gills in his abs, so you don't get to see that until way later. But he can breathe underwater and communicate with all kinds of sea life, whether they be mammalian or fish or crustacean. And the Deep is kind of having just a general conversation with her about the others, like Homelander, who is their Captain America type hero and figurehead. So very similar to the Avengers in that way, or to Superman and the Justice League. It's very analogous, and you see a lot of blending over from the Marvel and DC aspects, as well as from shows like The Watchmen. It's kind of a big Venn diagram in a way, and I really love how it draws upon all of them to kind of create this amalgamation that is the satire. So we see her kind of telling him, oh yeah, I looked up to Homelander too, but really I had a poster of you on my wall, and, that was silly, kind of, she's a little embarrassed. She's like, I had a crush on you. Is that inappropriate to say? She's very clearly not coming on to him. She's telling him that she had a girlhood crush, and she's very much an adult now, and she wants to make sure she's not offending her coworker, even in her candor in a conversation that he initiated in asking who she had a poster of on her wall as a kid. And when she turns around, he is touching himself inappropriately. He's totally dropped trowel and is standing there doing some stuff that he really should not be in public. It's a very big Me Too moment as well, which is something that is also very much in the current and recent American zeitgeist. So she's really freaked out by that. She's not anticipated this happening at all. And she's like, what is happening? And we see her go through the fight or flight response. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So you have those 4 general options. And I hesitate to call them options because they're often not something that you actually choose with your brain. Those are just 4 possibilities or potentialities, really, of what could happen when you're faced with a threat. And so she first tries to leave the room, and then he coerces her. So he tells her that he is really powerful and he's the second in command in the 7, and that he could really get her kicked out of the 7 before it's even really started. And so we see that she panics a little too, and her eyes flash, and she displays her power just a little bit in that the television screens in there all get cracked and go fuzzy and stuff. And he's like, I'm going to tell them that you attacked me and they'll definitely kick you out. Like, obviously you did that to the screens. So you can either go ahead and submit to this, or you can get kicked out. So she's gone through flee and she's gone through fight at this point. And most of the time people don't necessarily go through all of these stages, but sometimes you may have multiple attempts in your body trying to save you from something. And we see her go through those 2 first, and then she kind of freezes while he is standing there walking up to her and then just being way up in her personal space. and threatening her. And so this form of sexual assault is referred to as coercion. Coercion is a part of the legal definition for sexual assault. It's not always physical force. It is sometimes threats to yourself, physical threats to your family members or people that you care about, or it can be leveraging something like your job or your livelihood or your reputation. And for Annie/Starlight, he has essentially leveraged her entire dreams against her. And we find that she ends up caving to it. And that's not Annie's fault. That is totally on him for what he's doing. And it has an echo of what Harvey Weinstein and several of the other celebrities who were part of the Me Too movement have done. And in that way, it's very visceral and evocative. Now, it doesn't just happen to celebrities. The Me Too movement certainly made us very much aware of all of the casting couch types of situations, and situations that even really big established actresses go through, and actors as well. But at its core, it's a very human experience, and no one is beyond the reach of these things happening. It doesn't matter if Annie had been at home and hadn't made it, or if she did make it, as she did, and was still exposed to it. It's something that was really displaying to us that no one is beyond the reach of sexual violence, and that anyone can fall prey to it for any number of reasons. I think it's really powerful in that way, and as a woman, I particularly enjoyed's kind of the wrong word for it, but seeing it on screen resonated with me in a way, and seeing that everyone reacts to things differently in these situations. But whether it's coercion or physical force, or you end up going with fight, flight, flee, or fawn, no one is beyond it. And it doesn't matter how powerful you are. We all have baggage, and terrible things can happen to anyone. All right, we are going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more about Annie. You really can't underestimate the importance of having the right creative work for your brand or your product. Whether it's a logo, a website, a book cover, or an ad campaign, you really need a quality design to make that big difference pop and deliver your overall engagement and success in a competitive market. That's where Design Crowd comes in. Design Crowd has over 750,000 designers from Sydney to San Francisco ready to help you with awesome creative ideas. They make crowdsourcing work for you. So if you need a logo or you're working on your creative branding, you can go to designcrowd.com and post a brief describing the design you need. And then within about 2 to 7 days, you'll receive up to over 100 different designs from designers around the world. Then you pick the best design and approve payment to the designer. So you're only paying for the design that you want. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of freelancing and out of crowdsourcing. And you don't have to be a huge company like Harvard Business School to use Design Crowd, although they have used it as well. You can start a project on Design Crowd for as little as $99. And if you go right now to designcrowd.com/health and wellness or enter the promo code health and wellness on their website, then our health and wellness listeners will receive up to $150 off of your design project. That's designcrowd.com/health and wellness or entering that promo code health and wellness.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Before the break, we were talking about how Starlight is sexually assaulted by the Deep using a method known as coercion, and how sexual assault does not always come in the form of physical force, but may also come about via threats or coercion, and that really no one is beyond its reach. So Annie, the next time we see her, is throwing up in the bathroom, and it appears that this is a co-ed bathroom, as far as I can tell, but you see Queen Maeve, the only other female character on the 7, come in there as well and see her washing up, really, and you can tell that Annie has been crying too, and Queen Maeve is kind of cold about it, and she's like, hey, don't ever let them see you look like this. Clean yourself up. So even the female characters around Annie aren't really sympathetic in any way, and you can tell that this is just something that is very pervasive. It's endemic to this office setting that Annie is in, and it tells us a lot about Maeve at the same time. Maeve is very perceptive and is good at reading people, and she is, in her own way, even though it comes across cold and callous, kind of looking out for Annie. It's very much a, hey, this is just the way that it is, but to protect yourself, don't let them see you like this. You don't want them to view you as being weak or as being a victim. Even though Annie has every right to be as upset as she is in that moment. She's just been sexually assaulted. And it's a really heavy moment for her. But Queen Maeve is not going to hold her hand through this or anything. It's very much a chin up, buttercup. Things could be worse than this, and they're all crazy. So you can't let the men see you like this. And in that way, it's also a very female experience, where you cry in the bathroom if you have to cry at work. That's just how things are, and you don't let anybody else see the soft underbelly that you have, whether that be because you're a superhero or because you work in a corporation that is predominantly male. So it's really relatable in that way. And we also get another sense of Maeve as she leaves the room, and she goes, "Translucent, you're a pervert." And then you see that the guy who can turn invisible, translucent, has been standing in the bathroom naked watching them as well. And so Maeve is very much aware, even though she can't see him, that he's there and that he's a pervert. And it kind of serves as punctuation to her point to Annie. Like, it's not just the Deep that is like this. She doesn't even question Annie as to who it was. She just knows that it was one of the others and that things have gone really terribly for Annie so far, but that clearly Annie has made a choice, even if it was coercion, and that if she wants to remain there, she cannot show them any weakness. It's really upsetting, but it is also very true to life for a lot of people male, female, non-binary who have experienced sexual assault, especially something in the workplace or via coercion. I think that the directors and writers and the producers, Eric Kripke, Garth Ennis, all of the above, did a very good job in handling the subject matter and allowing us to feel upset about it and feel sympathetic towards Annie, but without going so far as to show the actual act. Now, they have a TV MA rating, and they could have gone that way, but I'm really glad that they didn't. I didn't need to see her cry through that entire ordeal or witness the sexual violence in order to understand the gravity of what has just happened to Annie, or gauge how upset she is, or see how pervasive this problem is in the workplace. Her reaction in throwing up and Maeve's reaction to Annie being in the bathroom crying and seeing translucent in the bathroom all culminated in really giving me a sense of what's going on. And they did that without any visual exposition. It's about how the characters are reacting and how they're saying the things that they're saying, not just saying, yeah, things are like that all the time around here, or showing us that it's that way. You just get the sense of it. And I think that that's very good storytelling. Now, after this point, you see Annie upset on a park bench. And when that happens, you see that Huey is sitting next to her. And they don't know each other at this point. But Huey is also on his own hero's journey. And he and Annie have both just been knocked down in different ways, but just absolutely crushing ways. So Huey's girlfriend Robin has just been killed by one of the supers who is on the 7 with Annie. A-Train, the fastest man on Earth, has sped right through Robin and didn't even really stop. He just turned around and goes, I'm sorry, I can't stop, and kept running. And it burst Robin into many different pieces right in front of Huey as he was kissing her. And it was very traumatic. And then when everyone found out about this and about Robin's death, you get a public apology by A-Train, but it's not really a real apology, because oftentimes in PR and in certain types of law, an apology is viewed as an admission of guilt. So that is why people on television and in the media will say, my condolences, or it's regrettable that this happened. They don't say, I'm sorry, because they don't want to actually be liable for an admission of guilt. But that really causes more anger in people. And you see that in Huey, where he's like, you guys aren't even saying that you're sorry, you killed her, and now you want me to sign an NDA and go ahead and accept $45,000 in exchange for this person I love's life? Like, it's offensive that all her life is worth to you is $45,000 to begin with, but also you are trying to pay me hush money on the day of her funeral? Really? It's really dark and it's messed up and it is oh so American. It's so capitalism, you guys. It's absolute capitalism, and it's really gross because you have his dad standing there going, hey, you should take that money. That could mean a lot for us. I know it can't bring Robin back, but you might as well. But Huey's like, hey, that means I can never talk about this to anyone. And he's still in this stage of immense grief. It has not been long enough for him to really process what's happened, because it's such an unusual and horrible way for someone you love to die. But it also happened right in front of him, and he went into shock at the time. So this is really just adding far more insult to injury. And while Huey has always been a very passive person, this is almost a hard stop for him. It is too much. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. It's a bridge too far, and all of those sayings. So for Huey, he's just kind of shocked that someone would offer that to him and that it would be that little, and also that his father would in any way support that. It makes him feel like he is entirely alone in the world in regards to how much he cared for Robin and in regards to caring for Robin's life at all, because everyone else's reactions seem very flippant. And that's where we find Huey as he is sitting on this park bench with Annie. All right, we're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about where these two heroes go next in their journey. Stay tuned.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were discussing the heroes' journeys thus far for Annie and Huey, up to the point where they find themselves each sitting on the same park bench in the middle of their city. So, thus far, Huey has been, I guess it was an attempt to bribe him in a way, but it has thus far failed regarding how he is reacting to Vought saying, hey, A-Train kind of killed your girlfriend, but our condolences. Not even my bad or an I'm sorry. There is no real admission of guilt, no true sympathy at that point at all. They just send a faceless lawyer to come to him and offer him $45,000 for the death of his girlfriend. It's not even a decent payout in terms of like life insurance, especially when you consider how much money Vought and all of them make. So it's really gross in that way. And also we have Annie, who has recently been sexually assaulted by the Deep and really been informed by Queen Maeve that all of their coworkers are crappy and that you can't show them any weakness at all. So Annie is kind of having a crisis of conscience, and she's also in just a really dark place as she sits on this park bench trying to tell her mom what's just happened, but her mom is really making the conversation all about herself instead. And so Annie ends this difficult conversation without being able to be honest and open with the one person that she feels that she should be able to trust in talking about this experience. And Huey is a very empathetic dude, and so he sees her struggling and he's like, hey, are you okay? That sounded like a rough conversation. I don't mean to pry or anything, but you look like you could kind of use a friend. And they both kind of confide in each other in vague terms about what's going on with each other. And Annie is saying, that she just recently got this job and she really loves it, but it's turned out to perhaps not be what she thought it would be in its entirety, and she's having trouble with this one coworker. And Huey kind of reframes it for her. He gives her an alternative perspective. And he asks her if she loves this job, if it is a dream job. And she's like, yes, this is what I've worked for my entire life. And he's like, well, then you've just been knocked down a little bit. You are having a setback, and it doesn't have to mean that this is the end of the road for you. You seem really tough, and like if you get knocked down, then you can get back up. And it really bolsters Annie, and she's like, you know what, you're right. I'm going to take that guy's head clean off. And Huey's like, whoa, that's a little hardcore, but I like your enthusiasm. So Huey doesn't know precisely what has happened to Annie. And so in that way, it's not really him kind of just shrugging off what is a very real problem for her. He only knows what she's told him in this vague way. And so he's trying to be supportive the best way he can. And it turns out to be a really positive interaction for both of them in what's truly a stage of grief for them. And it's really helpful to have somebody who really sees you in that way. It's something that's rare, but they both feel seen and understood, and like they have a similar sense of ideals. And he doesn't realize that she's Starlight. She's in plain clothes out on this bench. Although granted, Starlight's disguise, I guess, or her alter ego, her regular personality of Annie, isn't a super great disguise. She's just wearing a plaid shirt and jeans and chilling. It's got her hair in a ponytail. Not even glasses, you guys. So it's clearly Starlight to us, but also she's relatively new. And Huey has probably not been watching much television regarding superheroes lately, as he was once a really big superhero fan, a huge fan of the Vought 7, but is now really in a jaded place in that regard. So they end up having this melding of the minds, really, in their hero's journey, and it's a really great moment. And then everything goes kind of sideways again for Huey. Even more sideways than his girlfriend being killed by A-Train, running through her too fast. So the official story is that A-Train stopped a bank robber, but the character of Billy Butcher, played by Carl Urban, comes up to him saying that he is a Fed and that he wants to help Huey to get justice for his dead girlfriend, Robin. And also, I wanted to do a brief shout out to Robin because the woman who played her did a very good job in the limited amount of time we got to know her and making me go, oh, cool, I'm excited to get to know this character more. And then, even though I barely knew her as a character, I was still not quite crushed, but I was upset that she had died. I'm like, seriously? She seemed really cool, and now she's dead. So that's a big bummer. And she did that within like a handful of minutes. So shout out to that actress, whose name is Jess Salguero. But TLDR, Billy comes to Huey. We're going to call Billy Butcher for the rest of the time. That's what most of the characters call him. Butcher's like, hey, I'm a Fed. I can help you get justice for your girlfriend. Take a look at this. Here's the police reports from the city's precincts on the day that Robin was killed. And they say that A-Train was in such a hurry because he was out to stop some bank robbers. But there were no arrests for bank robbers that day. They weren't booked anywhere. So this is very clearly a lie and they're covering something up. And Huey's like, hey, I don't know you, dude, and you're kind of dressed like Magnum P.I. I'm not getting the real sense that you're actually a Fed, so I'm gonna bounce. But Butcher says something to him that kind of convinces him, and so Huey follows him into a dark alley, and then they go into this superheroes only club. So Billy Butcher goes ahead and kind of bullies his way into the club by threatening the doorman. And when they get inside, you see that this is just a classic den of debauchery. There are supes openly having sex everywhere, like they can fly, they're doing it in the air. All of those things that people wonder about like Spider-Man and such. Like, if Spider-Man could do it on the ceiling, would he? So everyone has taken this to the extreme, and it's really interesting to see how that works. You see them using their powers for debauchery instead of strictly being for good. We don't often talk about the sex lives of superheroes, and one reason for that is because it would prevent some viewers from viewing them, right? It's not PG-13 if you are showing things like that or discussing things like that. So in that way, we never really hear much about it, and that's why Deadpool being rated R was such a big deal. Not for the sex even, but for the violence. So we see that really Huey's learning a lot right now about heroes, and he's learning from Butcher that it's not just A-Train who may be irresponsible or who may be abusing his powers and his position of authority. He is just one of many. So we see that one of them, Ezekiel, is also really big in religious circles, and he's there having a gay three-way with a bunch of people, four-way maybe even, actually, in this club. And Ezekiel's like the Mr. Fantastic type character. He's really stretchy. So we're seeing what that looks like. So we have like a Reed Richards thing going on. We have a Superman thing going on. Like, Homelander seems like the baby of Captain America and Superman. And so really we're going through here and Huey's just shocked and he's like, are they all like this? And Butcher's like, all of them except for Homelander, who seems squeaky clean and has no records of anything ever. No birth certificate, none of that. So Butcher's whole point in taking this kid to this club is not to just see the debauchery that is happening, but really to also see this specific clip from the security cameras. So he has the security guy show him a clip of A-Train and one of the other supes having a conversation from the other night in which they are laughing, and A-Train says that he was going so fast that he swallowed one of Robin's molars as he burst through her like a fly on the windshield. And it just further incenses Huey. He was more in shock and kind of numbed and disgusted before, but now he's getting enraged because he's realizing not only do they not really care and they're not going to offer an apology, but also that they think it's funny. Like, they have a superiority complex, and for them it's like, oh yeah, so I killed your girlfriend, who cares? And it's really the final straw. Like, they keep going a bridge too far, but Huey is so passive in his own life historically that it takes a lot for him to get to his breaking point. Thus far, we keep thinking that he's gotten to it, but he's not quite there each time. And so Butcher convinces him to call that lawyer and say, hey, I will go ahead and sign that NDA and take the money, but only if you let me into the Vought building where the Vought 7 live and operate, which looks a lot like the Avengers Tower, and only if A-Train apologizes. And so they tell him no and hang up on him, and he's like, they're not going to go for it. And Butcher's like, oh no, they're going to go for it, and you're going to plant a bug while you're in there, and I'm going to walk you through it. So Billy goes in there, and just as we predicted, they are saying, hey, just so you know, this is not an admission of liability or guilt when he apologizes. So they preface it that way so that he can go ahead and go, hey man, my bad, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kill your girlfriend. But A-Train just doesn't even really seem to care, and he's like, all right, bye. So Huey does what he needs to do and then gets on out of there. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about what happens next.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how Billy Butcher has come through to Huey and convinced him to go into the Vault 7 building and plant a bug under the pretense of getting a personal apology from A-Train and taking the $45,000 that he's been offered. So he goes ahead and he does this, and he leaves and goes back to his job. But Translucent was being creepy and invisible in the bathroom again and has seen that the kid has dropped a bug and then put it under the table. So he takes it to the kid's work and proceeds to try to beat the crap out of him. But Butcher has really predicted this and rams his car into the building and sends Translucent flying. And they end up having an altercation, and the kid turns out to have more sense and intuition and ingenuity than Butcher had previously given him credit for. So remember, Huey's a big fan of superheroes, especially the Vault 7, prior to A-Train exploding through Robin. And so he knows that he can use one of the cables that Translucent has ripped from the wall and broken in order to electrocute him because of the substance that his skin is made out of, because he'd seen it on an episode of Jimmy Fallon. So he's found Translucent's one weakness, and in that way is able to go ahead and electrocute him until he passes out. And they think that he's dead, so they toss his invisible corpse into the trunk, which is kind of hilarious to watch. Because how would one go about trying to get rid of a superhero's body? And they go to one of Butcher's friends and try to get help in disposing of the body. Turns out Translucent's not dead, so they just get out a cattle prod and they go to a building and imprison him in a small cage that they have electrified, and they have sealed off the room to block the signals that would be coming from the microchip. Because Frenchie tells them, "You idiot, they're microchipped, all the others are going to come after them, Homelander is going to come find him." And so the kid worked at a store that was for installing electronics and everything. So he knew that this is how you block electronic signals, and they seal it off. Turns out Translucent is just as debaucherous as the rest of them. We've already established that he likes to stand there naked, invisible in the bathroom, and be incredibly lewd and inappropriate. But he also just kind of disappears for periods of time. And so his coworkers, except for Homelander, aren't very concerned about him. They're just like, yeah, that's just Translucent being Translucent. He'll pop up when he's done. So it gives them some time, and they try several things, including making a bullet out of the same material that Translucent's skin is made out of, to try to pierce through him, but his skin is as hard as a diamond. He's like Emma Frost in that way. He has diamond hard skin, and he's also invisible. So he has a couple of different characters crossed over into being who he is as Translucent, and again, I love it. But that is not good for our anti-heroes, the boys, because they are not able to get rid of his body. He's seen their faces. He would know how to find them. He's one of the 7. They have a lot of crime-fighting technology and a whole building full of people who are dedicated to finding criminals. So they, at this point, feel that they have to kill him, that their hand has been forced, and they have to kill him. Billy Butcher, of course, is just like, he wants to kill all of them. That's his personal mission in life. So he really wants Homelander, but he's cool with killing the rest of them along the way. So this is just a challenge for him. And you learn that Butcher has worked in Guantanamo Bay before, that he used to be CIA. And so he understands how to break people, and that this is just another application of it for him. This is just a new challenge. So they keep trying to find ways to go about this and to obtain this goal of killing Translucent. And in the meantime, Huey wants to know more about A-Train. He's like, hey, you work with them. Give me this information and I'll try to put in a good word for you so that they don't kill you. And Translucent, of course, sees right through him and understands that Huey has no power in that capacity, and he is not going to really be super helpful in regards to giving him anything. So there is no power in this exchange. So he's like, screw you, kid, I'm not telling you anything. I'm just going to wait this out until Homelander gets here, because he's so certain that they won't be able to kill him. But they do end up finding a way to kill him, and that is while he is incapacitated from being electrocuted with the cattle prod again, they keister some explosives up his butt at the time, which is also incredibly violating. We kind of gloss over that. It's horrifying and incredibly violating. It reminds me partly of that scene in Man on Fire that is very similar. But they go ahead and do that to him and tell him, hey, if you touch that, then, and you try to dig it out, then it's going to go ahead and go off. And also, if we hit this button, it's going to go off. So they have this crazy homemade trigger device that they are using to control him. But it's at that point that we see that part of the ceiling has opened up and Homelander is on his way. He is in the local vicinity. So they go out to bamboozle him and leave Huey in charge. But Huey has made the mistake in being a compassionate person and giving Translucent something to drink. So Translucent then pees into the glass that he has drank and uses that to short out the electricity. It's really smart, and I really liked how they went about that in this episode. So Translucent isn't just some idiot. He is debaucherous and lecherous, but he's also smart, and that is kind of horrifying as well. People can be more than one thing, and Translucent very much is. So he goes to escape, and Huey ends up going ahead and kind of letting him go. He freezes, sort of, and starts to let him go, and then decides, no, he's not going to be walked over this time, and he goes ahead and hits that button and explodes Translucent everywhere. So that is incredibly gory. This show overall is super gory, you guys. And I really love that they exercise the MA rating in that direction. Like, we get to see what it would actually look like if Superman used his beams from his eyes, or like if Scott used his beams from his eyes to go ahead and slash through people, and how absolutely gory that would truly look. Or when you're smashing somebody's face into a sink, what that precisely would look like. It's not going to be all neat and tidy like it is in a lot of these superhero movies due to the necessary ratings to maximize the amount of viewers that you can get. And it's really visceral. And I mean that in pretty much every sense of the word, visceral. It's a lot. If you guys haven't seen it, you should go watch it. If gore is your thing. If types of anime like Elfen Lied are your thing, then this may well be the superhero show for you. If you enjoyed the themes in Watchmen regarding what superheroes might get up to and who watches the Watchmen and how out of control they may get, then you may really enjoy The Boys. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up this episode in talking about where our heroes are as we get to the end of episode 2-ish.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about their journey with Translucent, how this has really panned out for Huey, and how his anti-hero's journey has taken a sharp left turn. So Huey has now actually killed Translucent. He was the one who pulled the trigger, and he's a little bit in shock about it. He's covered in guts and blood and is kind of rinsing himself off in the sink of this abandoned building. Now, I don't know how the water is running in this building. Perhaps it's currently under construction, and so they went ahead and got the water up and running so that people would have access to water while they're working on it. I'm not sure, but we do see that the water works. We saw Huey drink out of that sink earlier, and he starts rinsing himself off, and they give him a chef's coat that has been sitting somewhere else in the building. So he's kind of in shock. He's just done something truly horrific, and he's taken his life into his own hands at this point. This is a defining moment for Huey, and it's something that he is still kind of in shock about. It's very surreal for him that he has just killed someone who used to be one of his heroes, and he's found is actually a terrible person. So it's very complex of a moment for him. Before this point, Billy did not even have the fortitude to go ahead and ask his boss for a raise that he very much deserved. But now he has outright killed a person. Frenchie and Butcher have clearly killed a lot of people before, including many people they killed together. So for them, they're just like, oh, sweet, thanks. You went ahead and did this for us. We appreciate it. And Huey apologizes about the mess, and they're like, nah, dude, we're proud of you. Thank you so much. And it's weirdly wholesome in the way that they are being appreciative towards him while they're doing this weirdly domestic-seeming task of cleaning up blood and guts and body parts out of this area. Granted, Butcher goes ahead and just torches the place with grenades after a certain point, so I'm not sure why he even decided to start trying to clean it up to begin with. Who knows? But that is what happens. So we go ahead and see that Butcher and them are getting rid of the bodies, and they know that there's nothing that will really occlude Homelander's vision except for zinc. The only thing he can't see through is zinc. So they put the body parts into plastic bags and then put them in these boxes that are made of zinc, and they transport them looking kind of like band equipment in a way, and go and dump them into the ocean. But they know that it's just going to hold him off for a little while. With the other members of the Seven, especially the Deep, there's no way that this is going to be hidden from Homelander forever. It's just going to buy them time. We also see that following their conversation, Annie and Hugh's conversation, that Annie has really decided that she's going to go forward and be more of herself. And so she's walking home or just walking around town really, and sees two guys attempting to date rape a girl. And they are using physical force in this instance, but she seems to know them, which is why they are referring to it as date rape. So she goes in and she kicks their butts. This is something that has really recently happened to her. And so she is incensed. She's absolutely livid that there are more people doing this to other people. And she gets a sense of vindication in saving this girl. However, it's caught on tape and the girl has run off. So all you see are the two guys getting beaten up by Starlight. And so what she thinks has been a really good deed that she's done, and is in fact a good deed on its face, the PR people light her up for, because this was not something that was scheduled, and this was not something that they had pre-planned for, and it was on film. Also, no one can find the girl, so it's just Starlight's word that they were trying to sexually assault her when Starlight arrived. So it's very much for them, for Vought especially, a PR nightmare. It's a marketing issue in this world, even though she did what she was supposed to do and she did a good deed. It's kind of a no good deed goes unpunished type of thing. So she gets reamed at work and essentially temporarily benched because they need to go through what she has done. So they're like, essentially, lay low, you've kind of been suspended. We need to go ahead and process this, which is kind of a sick and cruel joke considering the fact that Starlight has also been sexually assaulted recently, and it's so endemic to this workplace that Queen Maeve has been like, yeah, don't let them see you like this. This is commonplace. This isn't something that we're super shocked about. And in that way, you can tell that very likely the other women around her who aren't supers, but who are responsible for PR and marketing and business relations, like Madeline Stillwell and like Ashley, the marketing/PR woman, are likely very well aware of this too. So it's really sick and cruel that she's getting benched at this point for standing up for someone else. But this is something that you also see happening in regular life. That's why a lot of people don't report sexual assaults. They are fearing some type of retribution against themselves. And we saw that in the Me Too movement, especially in the realm of academia, where certain professors were being charged with these allegations. And even though there were several people who were saying, hey, yes, that definitely happened, the school hadn't done anything about it until people in the media brought it to the world's attention. They took it outside of just the school to where they made it a PR nightmare. And once it was a PR nightmare, then it was something that was actually dealt with. But there was no true justice in that way. And we're seeing that Starlight is working for what is essentially the Justice League. And it is very unjust in almost every way. Someone who has sexually assaulted her is not being held liable for what he's done. And conversely, she's done what she very much thought was her job in stopping crime and is being punitively handled because of this. It's partly about how people are reluctant to do the right thing because of potential ramifications, and how sometimes doing the right thing looks like jeopardizing your job and everything that you have always worked for, and you have to decide what is more important to you. And I think a lot of it comes back to a Star Trek quote by Odo, actually, from Deep Space Nine. And we're seeing Annie explore this concept that the only thing that matters is that you don't betray yourself. So everyone around her is asking her to betray herself, except for Huey, who is encouraging her to be more of herself and to staunchly stand in her truth, no matter what that may mean. But everyone else is sitting there really testing her and taking pieces of her until she doesn't know really who she is. And it's leaving her in a lot of turmoil. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. We will pick up in a future episode with episode 3 of The Boys, in which we see the aftermath of our heroes, Starlight and Huey, really dealing with what has just happened and these left turns in their lives, as well as exploring these themes such as how fame and crappy jobs force you to surrender bits of yourself. You surrender pieces of yourself bit by bit by asking you to compromise until you don't recognize yourself. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.